to introduce you first, just to give everybody an idea of what we're going to be talking about today.
All right.
Mia, I just wanted to let everybody know, I met you when you were a volunteer at the aquarium here in Southern California, and we've been able to chat a couple of times, but I've just seen you on the internet doing your thing, talking so passionately, speaking truly from your heart, and I just want to say thank you for joining us today.
You.
Everybody watching, growing up in East New Orleans, Louisiana, Nia lived within walking distance from some of the most beautiful natural areas in the world and quickly developed a deep love for animals and the environment. And when she was 9 years old, that's when Hurricane Katrina hit and left her with aching confusion and trauma that she has bottled up for years. And she wants to be the person to tell that story. She is an aspiring marine and planetary scientist, and she wants to be the change that was needed to protect her and her people during Hurricane Katrina and help mitigate the effects of climate change. So Nia, you can take it away.
Thank you so much. That was such a great little intro. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me for Youth-A-Thon. Again, my name is Nia Burnett, and like Laura said, I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I've always, even before Katrina, I had a passion again for the environment. I would always watch the Magic School Bus and PBS Kids, and that really like just nurtured my passion for wanting. I want to be like Eliza Thornberry. I knew I want to travel the world, talk to animals, and and help animals, and especially help the planet. And that kind of cultured itself into a passion for marine biology. And through research trips I've had with within the marine biology field in college, I was introduced to planetary science. And now that both of those are basically what I'm trying to do right now. So I want to speak about environmental racism because my story with Hurricane Katrina is a story of environmental racism, which, although I knew partially growing up that that racism was a part of why Katrina was so bad. If those of you who do not know, especially the young ones, Hurricane Katrina was a very devastating storm that hit New Orleans, Louisiana, and some islands, and I'm sorry for that background noise, and Louisiana and some states in the South in the summer of 2005, the year 2005. And so, where's it going with that? And so I always wondered, with my senior thesis, for college, I was able to write about Katrina. I knew I wanted to write about how environmental issues disproportionately impacted coastal peoples of color and people of color on islands who usually don't have a stronger voice, who are usually not the face of environmental groups. And through my research, I found a lot of interesting things about environmental racism. So we're gonna go ahead, I'm going to play a video, actually. You guys can see my screen. I'm going to play a video that basically gives a definition for environmental racism, and we'll jump from there.
When we think of racial injustice, we think police brutality or the criminal justice system. But what about our air and water? Environmental racism. It's about policies and practices that discriminate against communities of color by making them live near landfills, sewage plants, and other polluting facilities. And while poverty has a lot to do with it, the leading environmental justice expert told me this.
Racism trumps class. Even middle-income African Americans are more likely to live in more polluted neighborhoods.
In fact, one study found that Black Americans making $50,000 to $60,000, 100,000 residents have been poisoned with toxic water contaminated by high levels of lead. Why? Because the state was trying to save a buck. Flint is around 57% Black, with 40% of its population living in poverty. Residents protested the dirty water for over a year, but were ignored. And that's how environmental racism plays out. Minority communities have much less political clout, so regulators can and often do ignore them. And not far from Flint is Detroit, where 83% of the population is Black. It's home to the most polluted zip code in Michigan.
Zip code is the most powerful predictor of health. And all communities and all zip codes are not created equal.
Southwest Detroit is surrounded by a lot of industry like salt mining, steel production, tar sands, oil refining, and coal burning. And that's meant that 1.6 million pounds of chemicals enter that community yearly. Not coincidentally, Wayne County, where Detroit is, has the highest number of children's asthma cases in the state. But look, environmental racism isn't just a Michigan story, it's an American story. Take, for example, Louisiana's Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch along the Mississippi River. It's known for its over 200 petrochemical plants and a high rate of cancer, mainly among Black residents. So, is there anyone protecting folks from environmental racism? Well, there's supposed to be. The Environmental Protection Agency has a special department called the Office of Civil Rights. But in its 22-year history, the office has never formally found a single case of discrimination. In fact, more than 90% of communities that make complaints find them rejected or dismissed. On top of that, the Guardian newspaper recently revealed that U.S. authorities across the country are deliberately distorting water tests in cities like Detroit and Philadelphia to minimize the reported amount of lead in the water. Environmental racism, while not always the most visible form, is also widespread. So, when is enough enough?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that was an awesome video. I think that does a really good job of just introducing the topic really well. And I know you had some notes that you wanted to go over. You can go ahead.
Okay, the first point actually that was brought up within the video was Cancer Alley, Louisiana, which while gathering my notes for this, for my session, I found out that unfortunately they are dealing with the coronavirus at a much different pace than the rest of the country. For a while, they had the highest deaths within their county. I would have to check, unfortunately, our numbers are increasing, so I'll have to check on those numbers. But due to the overt amounts of cancer in this 85-mile stretch, coronavirus is unfortunately really negatively impacting that stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So they're already, the people down there, especially like they said, the Black community is already at a risk of having 50 to, of getting cancer at 50 to 800 times more than the average citizen in the United States. So that's fun. That's fun. And another point that was brought up is that these communities, it's not that they haven't been voicing their concerns with what is happening within their communities, it's just that they are ignored. They're usually ignored. So again, with the EPA, with the Civil Rights Office, most of their cases, about 90% of their cases that were brought to them have been dismissed. And then again, with Cancer Alley, Louisiana, when the Black residents, what they're continuously fighting for my readings is that the courts that they bring their issues to with all these, I had 150 petrochemical plants. They said 200 within the video, so goodness gracious. But whenever they're bringing this issue to the courts are like, well, you don't have any proof that these petrochemicals are causing the cancer. And that's how it's been dismissed for years. So like, what do you do when the people who are supposed to protect you and help you continuously dismiss you, no matter how many times you bring up the obvious evidence of environmental injustices and environmental racism? So like, what do you do in that situation?
And that was something that we were talking about, you and I, last night and this morning and yesterday. We were talking a lot about that. And you had mentioned that when we talk about environmental racism, it's really important that we talk about it in the broadest context we possibly can. And I know you wanted to speak a little bit on how we're able to strengthen both the Black Lives Matter movement and the environmental movement separately, but by bringing them together along with several other social movements. So how are you able, in your personal day-to-day life, able to do that in an effective way?
So for me, actually, before I get to that, for everyone viewing my screen, this is a picture of the New Orleans coast that's a little eroded. It used to be very, very lush and green and marshy, but it's a little eroded. We'll get to that later. But to answer your question, for me, again, I have this unique perspective of when I want to be in STEM. I do aspire to be a scientist, but I also realize how extremely important science communication is. I love science communication. It's so fun. And me bringing my literal experience with an actual climate change and environmental issue fueled storm, like that I am not just a story that we read in the textbooks about what's going to happen. I actually experienced that. I know the fear. I know how bad it's going to be because I've seen it firsthand. I was one of those kids that was on the roof that they were showing all over the news around the world. I was one of those children, one of those people that was on top of a hospital building, actually. I was surrounded by water. It had the exact same feeling of being out in the open ocean, but I was in my city.
I know you included some photos similar to that in this presentation.
Yes. So to connect to that, let me see how I'm gonna do this. So to connect to that, this is actually Cancer Alley, Louisiana, right here. This is one of the, I could not, through my research determine if this was one plant or many, but again, they said that it was lined, so the residents are between these plants and the river. As you can see right here, this is the 85-mile stretch right here. And you can't really see the river. Oh no, that is the river. And all of these names you see are all the plants that are polluting the area of, unfortunately, Cancer Alley. And then here's just another photo. So again, like my experiences, I've experienced this, and I've also studied the history in addition to that caused the science policy and environmental policies that we have today. Because the reason why Hurricane Katrina was so bad is because in the 1960s, the all-white levee council of that area in an already dredged New Orleans. For those of you who don't know, New Orleans is 6 feet below seawater because we already dredged and destroyed the marshland underneath the mangrove forest. All that roots that kept it stable has been destroyed for our fishing industry mostly. And again, for these plants. So I studied that and I was like, oh, that's why Katrina was so bad. Exactly 40 years before Hurricane Katrina, the racist levee council decided, again, it was stated in the video that they will save money if they don't put the steel rods and iron rods inside the levees that surround the Black neighborhoods, because no one's going to care if the Black neighborhoods flooded. This is 1960s deep Louisiana. Those are the times. And then 40 years later, the money they saved was at the expense of the Black communities. The pictures I'm going to show right here are of the 9th Ward. So again, this 40 years exactly before Hurricane Katrina, there was Hurricane Betsy that hit. This is not a picture of Hurricane Katrina. This is a picture of Hurricane Betsy in 1965, New Orleans, Louisiana, the 9th Ward. I'm going to show you in the exact same image.
I do want to mention that Nia told me beforehand she has her grandma watching on YouTube Live, which I think is like the sweetest thing. And
Hi,
you told
Granny.
me that your grandma survived both Hurricane Betsy and Hurricane Katrina.
Well, she actually, when Katrina hit, she wasn't physically in New Orleans, but she was watching us. She was actually in California watching on the news, like, oh my goodness. And of course, no one could get in contact with us. We were trapped. No one could get in contact with us. It took a week minimum. It took 9 days for us to get help. So New Orleans was sitting in some I think the water was like, the temperature in the water was like 93 degrees, if I remember correctly. So it was warm, great for, I'm glad an epidemic or pandemic wasn't happening at the time. That is perfect for situations like that. So when vulnerable communities who are already suffering from daily discriminations, when big issues happen like pandemics, like hurricanes, like tornadoes, is going to compound onto those vulnerable communities again. So we need extra protections in the communities like mine. So again, this is not 2005, this was 1965, New Orleans, Louisiana, Hurricane Betsy. This was 2005, Hurricane Katrina, same same neighborhood. And I actually, when I was 9, when we were finally rescued by the National Guard, I was in one of these double chopters flying over New Orleans. And I just remember I thought I was over the ocean. And because of the storm surge, in a way we were over. It was mixed with, the Mississippi River and oceanic water. So here we go. Here is again, Hurricane Betsy, 1965, 2005, 1965, 2005. So if these policies are not updated and these levees were not updated, then these same communities are going to continue to be disenfranchised by climate change issues. And then this is just for you guys to see. This is a levee right here. If you can see my mouse right here, that's a levee. That's a levee. And this is just a perfect example how it just broke. It was like wallpaper. And we really did not have a chance. So this is actually the storm surge right here. And this is where the levee broke. And it just let loose, unfortunately. Just gonna go ahead and see which pictures. Okay, we're not there yet, but yeah. I kind of rambled, but
that's okay. It's really a phenomenal story of survival, of overcoming, having to go through all of those horrible things, and to see you so passionate still and have not lost any of your fire because of all of the things that happened is really amazing to see. And I know I read as much of your thesis as I could. It is for those of you who may not know, Nia wrote an amazing undergraduate thesis, and I'm very privileged to be able to read it. You're an excellent writer. You're a very, very talented writer. And the story is just, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And when you said that it's the juxtaposition between the 1965 Hurricane Betsy and the photos from right now, that to me is very much like, we're not learning from our mistakes here. Mm-hmm. We're not learning from our mistakes. In a political sense, you guys, mm-hmm. you're the ones who, in those communities, are the ones that are experiencing that. You don't have mm-hmm. to continue to learn these lessons over mm-hmm. and over again. So what is your best suggestion for taking that next step? How do we really make sure we're learning from history?
Listen to the people who have experienced it and who were not the spectators of the incidents, if that makes sense. I know that the levee systems haven't been as updated as they could be. So, and I know from the 15 years since Hurricane Katrina, our Mississippi River is a little higher than it used to be. What we're facing, that's why on top of the pandemic and all the issues happening in the United States right now, I am stressing about hurricane season, because it's not just going to be a Hurricane Katrina this time. It's going to be a Hurricane Katrina on top of the Mississippi River already flooding New Orleans and the surrounding areas. So I wish, like, we need to give a voice, a stronger voice, or it's not actually, you know what? It's not that we don't have a voice. It's that we are speaking and screaming, but again, we're dismissed. So we need very strong allies in this sense, because like we saw in the video, and like I gave in the example, we're going to the sources that are supposed to be protecting us, and then we're being dismissed, saying, oh, I see no proof. Oh, New Orleans is flooded. I don't see, I need more proof. Like, show me more proof. So I actually saw on Facebook, it's like, giving all the issues happening right now, it was a post that said, you need like 43 dissertations, 23 citations, just a list of things, like all these, the densest proof that you need to believe people when they're saying they're being discriminated against, when the proof is right there. So that is my answer to that question.
Yes, yeah, that it is very, very true. And you wrote some examples of outside of Katrina, because it happens not just in our country but all over the world too. And I think when we talk about like hurricane season, right, I'm stressed out about that too. I think everybody who is paying attention is probably stressed out about it as well, but it's on another level. And for you to come from those communities is saying something as well. So I don't know, I sent you a post on Instagram that just popped up. I was like going through the feed about Isle de Jean Charles. Do you want to speak
Isle
about
de Jean Charles.
Yeah.
That was also in my thesis.
Yeah.
I actually have a picture. Isle de Jean Charles is an island. You know, Louisiana, the South, they were, still are, but surrounded by barrier islands that are supposed to help mitigate when tropical storms and hurricanes do happen, because hurricanes and tropical storms have happened before we started messing with the climate. And these islands would help soak up all the extra water in the storm surge. So Isle de Jean Charles is home to an indigenous population, and yeah, so they're sinking. The island is sinking. This is the island right here. You can see how narrow it is. It's very long and very narrow. It did not used to look like that. And all this area is marshy land, wetland, that's supposed to, again, act as a sponge, as our mitigator for storm surges, for hurricanes and tropical storms. And unfortunately, it seems that they're going to be the first climate refugees from within the United States. So there's a lot of power dynamics that goes into this because this community has not necessarily really contributed to climate change and these environmental issues on the scale that one massive company conglomerate in the world has, if that makes sense. So it's very frustrating because you don't have the power to even impact the climate like this, but you're being disproportionately impacted negatively by it. And then you don't have a voice, or you struggle to have a voice and a say of what happens to your communities when these things go down. So I believe I have
I do want to just like mention something.
Mm-hmm.
The climate refugee idea.
Mm-hmm.
Would you, I don't mean to be like as an invasive question, do you consider yourself a climate refugee just because of the idea that these hurricanes are happening at a higher rate, they're becoming more powerful more often, and Hurricane Katrina was one of the first, like, in modern history where people were really displaced in this country, not including Hurricane Betsy. But do you consider yourself a climate refugee?
Refugee has, unfortunately, due to the climate of this country, become such a negative term, and I hate that. But I actually do, because of how especially we were treated afterwards and the relocation process that took place for us. And also, everyone was relocated. We were just internally relocated. But when some things that were not portrayed on the news after Katrina wasn't necessarily circulating as much, was the heavy discrimination that especially the Black community went through in New Orleans when we were trying to leave. There were literally people swimming out and walking out of New Orleans the best way they could, and was met with a lot of pushback and negativity and violence from surrounding communities, because they did not want us coming into their communities. So I do consider myself a climate refugee, because after that, New Orleans was never the same after that. And we were moved around so much after that by FEMA and other response groups, governmental response groups. And we were moved around the country a little bit, from Texas to finally to California. So I do, especially given my experiences and how we were treated afterwards, which wasn't always in the most positive light. So. Yeah.
And we can talk more about that at the end if you want to continue going. I wanted to bring it up because, you know, you said the communities that are hit first and worst tend to have the least and lowest impact on it in the grand scheme of things. So I just wanted to hear your input on that, but go ahead.
For this question?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see, what's my favorite example? I think my favorite example is the island of Kiribati. I think they're actually the most isolated, mile-wise island in the Pacific Ocean. They are almost completely like self-sustained with their environment, with their island. They're able to source all the resources they need within their island, and of course the ocean surrounding it. And they are sinking. Their island is not sinking, I'm sorry, the sea level is rising. So and they're like, we're completely self-sustained. We have absolutely no impact on this, but no one wants to hear our voices on this. And not to, again, bring on the issues of what's happening in this country, no one's going to necessarily be as inviting to a group of brown people coming into the United States as, again, refugees. So that is, I'm bouncing around so much, I'm sorry. Again,
Well,
like I said earlier,
it all goes back to all of these different social movements kind of having an impact on other social movement. There's a lot of overlap there. And the issue that this country has in the United States with people of color coming in from other places is insane, because first of all, absolutely no basis whatsoever. We don't even need to talk about that. We all know that already. But it's just going to get worse. With the way that climate change is going, it's just going to get worse. In the Middle East right now, all of the unrest over there is over water shortages, right? And I'm sure you can probably speak a lot about that as well. Water is something that we all need, but in the right way. Maybe.
So it's like water is the reason why we've had so many human advancements. Most of our advancements started along coasts, whether they're near lakes or seas or oceans. We literally need water. So the fact that we do not protect our water is very, very self-discriminatory in a way. So it's water access, again, clean water, and just access to safe water, because water is becoming very unsafe for us in very different ways around the world, is very much an issue. And again, if your voice is not the one that has the political clout, it's very tough to get your voice heard for these separate issues.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to ask you, what are some of the ways that you think could have the most change be impacted? Is it policy change? Is it a societal change? Where exactly do you personally believe that all of us in the environmental space should be focusing on right now?
I'm going to start with societal, because something that I've dealt with, again, in STEM and in environmental spaces, is this has nothing to do with you. Or like just that feeling that I have this barrier that I have to kind of break down for people to see me as someone worth listening to, or someone worth contributing to the conversation. Before I can even do the work that I want to do. And with the recent Black Birders Week that's been going on, it was so amazing. Just in another hashtag, Black in the Ivory, I found out, I was like, oh, my experiences are not that different. So societal wise, we have to, again, I'm pretty sure everyone's tired of hearing this, but we have to include more voices. We cannot be true leaders if all your voices are saying the same thing, because everyone's voice isn't impacted by the same things. So again, breaking down the stigma of people of color, and especially Black people in these spaces, because we do care about the environment. We do impact the environment, but we're also very extremely impacted by these climate change issues that we have not historically had the power to influence as well. And then policy-wise, I know there's a lot of amazing organizations out there that are working on policy, but then again, as things were said earlier, like bridging the gap between policy and STEM and the public who want to get involved, but who don't necessarily have the vocabulary or the tools or the know-how, or just who need to be pointed and bridged in the direction to go. So yeah, they both can use, we need a bridge, create a bridge between policy and STEM, I know a lot of people are working on this around the world. And then societal wise, realize that there are many voices. We are all impacted by climate change and these environmental issues, some disproportionately, many disproportionately, and all of our voices count, especially.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love what you said too, is that you can't have, I don't remember the exact quote, I'm like, I have a million things in front of me here, but you said, you can't have change without different opinions, and people experience different things. And it is so important. And You are just, you're amazing. You're
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, thank you.
So what are the rest of the slides that you have? I know was this Kiribati or was this ALD Jean-Charles?
This was Alde Jean-Charles. This was not cute. Oh, and then the rest are mangrove forests that I wanted to get
That's what we were going to talk about.
mangrove forests. Oh my goodness, I'm very passionate about those. Because they would have
mentioned earlier that they act as a buffer for these kinds of mega storms.
I had to write down everything, even though I've read about this a lot. Mangrove forests, for those who don't know, they are coastal forests, or referred to as blue forests because, again, they're also salt tolerant, which is super cool. So they can grow in freshwater and salt water. They are some of the most important ecosystems on the planet. They act as a carbon sink, meaning that they take a lot of carbon out of the air, out of our atmosphere. They store it in their roots and in their soil, and they also return it back to the ocean to continue the carbon cycle. They act as nurseries for sharks, shrimp, so many animals around the world. They act as a source of medicine for us. One of the main sources is for cancer medicine. What else? Again, they act as a buffer for storms. In addition to barrier islands, they help slow down those storm surges that come with hurricanes and tropical storms. They stabilize our coastlines. Again, that's why New Orleans and a lot of coastal areas around the world are destabilized. New Orleans is 6 feet below water. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, it was a bowl that filled up. So that's a bad situation we're in, but we deforested, well, not us, but like historically, our mangrove forests have been deforested for our beautiful, beautiful fishing industry, especially our beautiful shrimping industry. In the United States, we have a multi-billion-dollar fishing industry that will be very tough to tackle. But again, mangrove forests they provide so many ecosystem services for our planet, keep us alive. They keep they really assist in keeping our air clean as well. Yes, they absorb a lot of pollution as well.
Yes, yeah, definitely that as well. And I also, mangrove forests, ecologically speaking, they tend to be in more of the tropical areas, like in Southeastern Asia and Japan, and especially in the US as well. But over there, those are a lot of the areas like Palau and Micronesia. Those are a lot of areas where we are seeing a lot of the same problems that you had in New Orleans as well. And I really love mangroves as well. I grew up in South Florida. I spent a lot of time down there. It's a really beautiful, beautiful ecosystem. And I believe, have you ever seen those scientific videos where it shows, it's like in a little, I'm like totally blanking on the word right now, but it basically is a visual to show the difference in the wave pattern with the mangrove on a coastline versus without mangroves on a coastline.
Yes, I've seen those.
Yeah. Super amazing. And you also, I believe you mentioned a Superfund site in Georgia as well as being a main topic.
Yes. So there is a Superfund site. For those of you who don't know, Superfund sites are areas, they say they're like an old flame retardant factory, an old oil refinery, just something that produced harsh chemicals that we do use in our everyday life, that were supposed to be, or that are usually, cleaned up and closed down. You usually don't want to have anyone living near these areas. You don't want animals near these areas because chemicals can stay along, they have a long shelf life. And these areas are kind of self-preserved if they're not shut down well. So there is a Superfund site in Brunswick, Georgia. It's about an hour south of Savannah, Georgia. And it's been operating since 1918, so for 102 years. Except that they were shut down in 1994. They have been leaking chemicals into the Atlantic Ocean since 1918. 1918, even after it shut down. But here's the thing, the company said that, and actually it's a scandal, a lot of people went to jail for this. The company said they shut it down and cleaned it up, but they did not. They did the quickest, cheapest, always the cheapest, easiest way to kind of clean up this oil refinery. And it's been leaking into the ocean where we eat our fish, where we source our fish.
statistics on just how much, because that's a long time to be leaking those kinds of chemicals into the ocean. Do you have any idea of the total amount of chemicals that have been released?
So because of the this research is new, so this is research there because again, back in the environmental regulation in 1918 wasn't the best. So from my research that I've done is that they're again still doing research to find out how bad the damage is. And again, they did communicate with the government, with the local government, and with Georgia Power that they shut down, that is clean, and no one really necessarily investigated it afterwards until recently, like 2015. So this is still new. So the investigation into this started in about 2015. So we're still gathering information. So yeah.
Wow. Well, hopefully with your experience, maybe you would be able to help them clean that up too.
I would love to.
Yeah. So we did get one question, just to share the link to the video that you had.
Okay.
But do you have any questions that you want to ask the audience? Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
In addition to, I guess, the environmental justice work I want to do and the STEM communication work I want to do, I am a true science nerd. So if you ever have any marine biology or planetary science questions, please send them over here to me. Or just like any experiences, anything about Superfund sites. I do have some readings for you guys if you guys want to check that out. Yeah, I can talk about Love Canal, which is by Niagara Falls, which is I think that was one of the triggers for people to realize, hey, maybe living by a flame retardant factory isn't the best idea, or to have one at all.
It definitely doesn't
for the
sound
environment. So I can go over
a couple of questions we have. Thank you for this information. I learned so much from you about a topic I knew almost nothing about. So
yay.
Nice there. We have somebody, Chestina Craig, I think a professor at my university, works on this Superfund site. So maybe something will happen there. That's pretty cool.
Right.
But I do want to let all of the viewers know, you guys need to go follow Nia on Instagram. She is at Stardust and Ocean Drops. She has been dropping the knowledge consistently for the last 2 weeks. It has been a pleasure to read everything you have online. I love the what was the science nerd account that you just made?
I made two accounts I had a plan before March 2020, all this. I had a plan. So I have the Stardust and Ocean Drops account. I'm going to make a blog, and then I do have the Nerdy Brown Mermaid account that I'm going to also incorporate into my plan once everything calms down.
Well, we'll keep everybody updated with all of your stuff as well. And I'll mention this again at the end of the hour. We have about 15 minutes left. But Nia will also be joining us. Bailey has set up the Rise Up webinar series. Myself, I was on episode number 3 about storytelling, and Nia is going to be joining us for episode number 4. So if you guys want to follow Nia's story and talk more about that, Bailey, if you want to mention anything about that as well.
No, I was actually going to ask a question. So I saw in the chat as well, someone asked, what are some resources to learn more about this issue? But the question I just had while just listening is, what are some ways, it can be so overwhelming, right? We can listen to presentations like this and be so inspired, and then be so inspired by so many other things, and to learn everything is overwhelming sometimes. So I just was wondering, what are some tips that you have for kind of, informally increasing your knowledge about these topics if perhaps you don't go to school for them, or you're still in high school or middle school, or you're, still, might be the first time you've ever heard of this. What are some tips that you have for kind of increasing that knowledge and learning more? Is it just Googling? Is it going to the library?
Great question. Okay, so one, I'm gonna give a shout out really quick. And if you guys have Instagram, you can follow Brown Girl Green. She gives very in-depth posts and resources about what I talked about with environmental injustices and environmental racism. She's a great account to follow. Hi, Christy, if you're watching this. So some resources, I would say start small because it is very overwhelming. That's why I ignored my own story until I was in my 20s, because I was so overwhelmed with what happened. There's so much that connects to that one specific story with Hurricane Katrina, and then like what we have with Hurricane Maria. Like there's so much that goes to that one story, with the mangrove forest, with the racism, with how the levees were built, with the overfishing of the area. There's so many layers. So start with one topic. So when I graduated, hi, Miss Miller, from my marine biology class at Immaculate in high school in LA, I went to college thinking, someone said earlier that they don't know anyone who graduated with their original idea of what they were going to graduate in college. I was like, I'm going to tackle overfishing. I'm going to tackle overfishing. And I learned about mangrove forests and the deforestation of mangrove forests. I'm like, well, I'm going to tackle mangrove forests. And then so just focus on, find one topic to focus on, because they really do all connect. All of these issues really do connect. It's all of a cycle. So start on one. If there's one thing that piqued your interest, look up barrier islands of the South. Unfortunately, we have deforested and most of our mangrove forests, and our barrier islands over here. Louisiana alone had most of the mangrove forests on the North American continent. So start with one small topic if you want. If anything piqued your interest, start with that one topic and it will connect you, I guarantee. And if whatever you feel in your heart, like that keeps hitting right, just write that down whenever you're doing research. Like keep writing the topics that that resonates with your soul, if that makes sense. That's how I got here.
Awesome. I just also got another question as well.
Okay.
How do you get involved? Like, how do people get involved? Is it just learning more about the issues? Are there groups that you can suggest that people check out, give support to, give love to, maybe even volunteer with, or even just like personal actions? And maybe y'all have got this and I'm just like jumping ahead, but that was just one question I got to my side.
Okay. One way, okay, this is where I'm also adjusting, because coming from college, all the programs are kind of established. So I can actually gather a list. I do have some, I just can't think of them off the top of my head, of organizations, environmental justice organizations especially, that you can get involved with, that have nationwide, if not global chapters. So that will have to be like a post session that I can gather that for. But there are organizations, and there's different books you can read, like there's a book called Come Hell or High Water that is a great environmental justice book. It's about, again, Hurricane Katrina, and it talks about the history of that area. Look up the history of environmental policies. Just start with your area to see where the policies a lot of our policies come from a long time ago, and then they don't apply to everyone who lives in this country. So start with your local area and look up the history of those environmental policies. And I will gather a list for you guys, I promise.
Yeah, and if once you have that list, I think I've been taking notes this whole time. We're going to have a big collection of resources to send out to all of our viewers. So whenever you have that, we got it. Hell or High Water, I just see Andrew posted the Amazon link for that book in the chat. So you can definitely check that out. Thank you, Andrew, for doing that.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, do you have anything else you want to say? You had this amazing list. I just want to make sure you were able to touch on all of the topics you wanted to speak about.
I knew I would bounce around. I knew I was going to bounce around.
Okay, it's okay.
That was pretty much it. I just, a common comment I would get is if someone didn't know what environmental racism was, they would say, well, how can the environment be racist? How can a tree be racist? Someone has said that to me before. It's like, no, it's not that. Obviously the environment doesn't care. It's who made the policies, like what policies were made, what actions, how did the country look when these policies were made? Segregation plays a massive, massive part in a lot of our modern day policies, even though we might not, it's no, I'm not even going to say that. Even though we think we think segregation is over, there's a lot of policies. A lot of our policies were created back in the day when not everyone had a voice, and everyone still doesn't have a strong voice in this. So.
Yeah, and in talking about those historical policies, both with segregation and how it impacts current environmental history or current environmental policy, is very important. It's very much relevant. We do have one more question.
Okay.
Do you have a favorite community organization or initiative that deserves more money and attention than it gets? That's a very good question.
Oh my goodness, that is a very good question. Oh my gosh, because I've been so all over the place the last few years, so like I don't have a established community yet. Oh, that's a great question. Let me see.
There's so many groups that are doing so many things.
There's so many groups. So there are so many groups that are doing so. You guys ask such great questions. They're doing so many great things. I'm going to go ahead and shout out Brown Girl Green again, because I know that she has been doing a lot of work, and she does have a community of people who are doing active environmental activism out there. But again, I will get that list to you guys. You guys are asked great questions about this.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Brown Girl Green, awesome account on Instagram. I've also been following her for years. Yes. I know, Nia, you're very excited. She posted you in her Instagram story today. I hope she is able to check out this talk. But yeah, you guys have asked some amazing questions. Nia, thank you so much. We do have, I think we had one more question. Maybe I'm losing it. I'm not sure. But yeah, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any actions that you can have, each one of us watching this, something that we can do in our own lives that can help mitigate the impacts of both climate change, but also environmental racism?
I think listen, because that's been my struggle and the struggle of a lot of people who I've worked with in the past who felt like their voices weren't being heard. And realize that something we have to realize, I think for everyone, is that we're in this for the long haul. Something I try to communicate on my platform is that when we start making these changes, look what happened with the pandemic when everything slowed down. The earth began to heal itself. But we are in this for the long haul. When we all begin to mitigate, it's going to take about 10 to 20 years to even replant 30% of the mangrove forests that have been deforested. And in that time, climate change isn't going to slow down. It took a long time for us to get here, and it's going to unfortunately take a long time for us to mitigate that, to slow it down, to prevent issues. That's why I'm learning about mitigation, the difference between mitigation and people say stop climate change. I was like, no, it's not going to stop next year just because we started doing change, like just because we slowed down our plastic production, drove our cars a lot less. It's going to take a while because this is a massive planet we live on. It is a massive engine that has been revving for over 100 years. With warnings along the way. There were lots of warnings from lots of scientists, but we are in this for the long haul. Do not be hard on yourself. Realize that continued consistency and small actions will make the difference, because there's a lot of denial out there about what's happening. But
I agree. I would say my favorite two takeaways from this are #self-care. Very important. Marathon's not a race, right? We got to take care. Anybody who's in the activist space, all of our brains are hurting right now. We got to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. We can't carry the weight of the world on our shoulders if we're not taking care of ourselves. And then also, science is not an opinion, but I don't think that anybody who is watching this right now has an issue with that.
You know how you have, like, you host the little questions on Instagram? I cannot post most of the responses I get. Like with the last one I had about the megamouth shark, I was like, oh my gosh, guys, what? This isn't an opinion. You can go, it's out there in the ocean right now. I can't make this up. I can't, like, it's just, unfortunately now we have to break down the denial as well, and then keep proving that this is all these issues are happening. and then we can have a conversation. That's frustrating, but we've got this.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's doable. Thank you so much, Nia. I'm going to put Nia's Instagram here in the chat. I'm going to hand it back off to, I believe Andrew is up next. We have, after Nia, we're going to take a little bit of a break here, and then we will be back with Paul Rose from National Geographic Pristine Seas. I'm going to put Nia's name in the chat here, and then I think we're good.